Welcome to another episode of the Caroline Glick Show. All of you guys who've been watching from the beginning know that for the first 50 episodes, I didn't do this on my own. I did it with my buddy, Dr. Gadi Taub. And then we kind of went our own ways and he became an erstwhile co-host. And then he sort of faded off and became a superstar in Israel. So I just dragged him back onto the screen to where he belongs with me right here. So, hey, Gadi, glad to have you back with me on the Caroline Glick Show.
It's a pleasure. I remember these days fondly.
Right. Nostalgia, huh? Memories. I think we're at episode 130 of this show, right? So it's been a while.
We did 15 together?
No, we had I think we had more 40.
40?
I don't know. We did a lot.
I started all this in the days of Corona where I had nothing to do, so I produced an episode every 2 days or something.
It's good stuff, right? So now I'm big time Hollywood, and then anyway, but it's great to have you back. A lot to talk about this week, and I wanna start focusing on a new thing that you're doing. So you just started this really interesting and innovative project, which is Friday Studio, that is this YouTube show that people can watch on their television through their smart machines. And it goes live on Friday nights during Shabbat at 8 p.m.
At exactly the same time as Arutzei Tavela, as the leftist propaganda on the mainstream media channels. They 5 minutes to 8. We air at the same time.
So I think this is a really good way to lead into the true enemy of our times, which is the media. So give me a sense of the thinking behind it. And from there, let's see where it goes.
Ever since the reform, propaganda picked up.
The judicial reform.
The judicial reform.
Yeah.
Propaganda picked up here like it picked up with Trump in the United States. So as my friend Dan Shiftan says, Channel 12 used to be 60% leftist propaganda and 40% news. Now it's 90% propaganda and Amit Segal. So
Amit Segal being their token right winger, who also wears a kippah and does not appear on Friday night's broadcast, right?
Yeah. So there was Ayala Hassan on Channel 13, but they kicked her out or forced her out in some way. So now it's if you are on the right and you're not observant and you watch TV on Friday night, you have nothing to watch.
Because Channel 14 is off.
Channel 14 is off. Galei Israel, the radio, the right-wing radio, is also off the air. So there's a void. And we said, let's fill it in. And then we said, we have a show. And then we did it on Zoom. And it was basically nothing. We just recorded as Zoom with we had a background, like a green screen background. And that's all. So it was, you saw the Zoom squares, but the content was very high quality because the group of us that did it, Dr. Ran Baratz, Professor Limor Samimian Darash, from the left or the center left, Professor Avi Bar-Eli, who is the head of the Ben Gurion Institute for the Study of Israel and Zionism. So it's Evan Stadmor. It's a really good.
It's a great group.
So what we did is just have a very interesting conversation, and then you look at those studios, and propaganda is usually boring. It's boring. So we made a point of rating. Just think, Channel 11
on the first show already made up.
Yeah, so we made a quarter of the Israel's NPR. Not the radio, but
our state television.
Yeah, so we did great, and we think we can fill this void. And then we started a subscription model, saying, if you want this to be an independent show, give us. It was my idea to say 1 shekel a day, and we'll give you an independent media outlet. And all you need, think about it, all you need is 2,000 people. And if you have 2,000 people giving 1 shekel a day, you have a budget in which you can start renting a studio. And when you rent a studio, we're going to beat these guys because we're not boring. That's our secret.
It is a secret because it's really one of the hard things to take about the left's propaganda is how dumb it is. I just wrote this article that came out this morning on JNS where I was talking about how crazy it is that the leftist protesters against the judicial reform are getting the traction they are. I mean, these are people who are seeking to use violence and intimidation and ostracism and whatever to overturn the results of an election that they lost. I mean, they're using the most anti-democratic means known to mankind, except like genocide, in order to seize power and disenfranchise their political opponents. And it's like, how can they call themselves champions of democracies? They're the guardians of democracy. Now, these are people who prefer the PLO, replete with their Holocaust denial and praise of Nazi Germany, over their countrymen because they don't like their way of life, they don't like their Judaism, they don't like their anything about them, they hate them. And so, and yet their banner is the national flag. Like, they're the patriots. They're calling for people to refuse to serve in reserves. They're trying to break apart the army, and they're presenting themselves as patriots, and they're getting away with it all because of the media. And like, they have 100% support of the media, and it's just shocking.
It is, and the media. What happened to the media? I like to quote Andrei Mir, the scholar of journalism, who calls this post-journalism, and says that it's what we see, and this is what I'll add from my observations on both America and Israel, because it's the same thing. The media has turned from the watchdog of democracy to the attack dog of the FBI and the attack dog of the Parklitut, the Attorney General here, and the attack dog of the police here. And this is what they're doing. And and I don't know if your show has been following this, but we have seen a rise in the use of cyber weapons against Israelis. And the media is trying to cover that up. There was one brave journalist in Kalkalist. It's a marginal supplement for economics, published by the Yediot Achronot publishing house, and he started this investigative journalism. And then there was a cover-up committee.
We talked about it on the show. The Pegasus spyware tool that they were using.
In America, you need a FISA court in order to get into Carter Page's cell phone. Here, they did it on thousands of people.
Right.
Now they're admitting more than 1,000. In the beginning, they said, there was a mistake. There were like 3 people. Yeah. And we said, in Har Chotzvim, which is not very far from where you and I are sitting
That's
now,
the police cybersecurity unit.
They have a SIGINT cyber unit with 500 people. And you're telling us that all they did is operate this software twice? That's what 500 people, that's all they did? These are people from Unit 8200, which is the cyber unit of the IDF. So the police imported tools from military intelligence, operated against enemies, and it's using them on Israeli citizens. And when I was working in Haaretz, after this cover-up committee where the Attorney General and the Yoamashit, the legal counsel to the government's office,
the Attorney General,
they said they'll investigate themselves.
Right, and no, they brought in Amit Marari, who was in charge of the cyber.
Was supposed to be interrogated for this. Was supposed to be.
She was the one who oversaw the whole spy operation against Israeli civilians.
And lo and behold,
and she found that.
Everything is okay. There's a little mistake. We tried it once and failed, and then with filter.
Nothing to see.
Go on, everyone.
And then the media moved on.
And that's not just moved on. So I'll tell you a story about Haaretz, because I was then working in Haaretz before it became all propaganda, and they kicked me out. And I wrote a piece about how the press began to cover up for the police ever since the Netanyahu investigations. And if you look at it from their perspective, from the police perspective, the police just understood the game. If you give them Netanyahu's head, you get a carte blanche to do whatever you want.
That's what happened with Hiran, right? I mean,
they
falsely accused a Bedouin who was killed by police during protests or whatever in a Bedouin village in the south, and the police falsely accused him of being a terrorist, and he wasn't. And they got away with it because Roni El-Sheikh, who was the police inspector general, decided, okay, I get the game. I'm going to go on the attack against Netanyahu. And then Shai Nitzan, who was the state prosecutor, he told the head of the police investigative unit, said, "Go easy on Roni El-Sheikh because
we don't want to rock the boat." די לחכימה ברמיזה.
And everybody understands.
Everybody understands why. That was the actual. That was the actual expression. So I wrote this piece,
which is just a Homeric way of saying nod, nod, wink, wink.
Exactly.
That's what he said.
So I wrote this piece about it, and they refused to publish it in Haaretz. And my editor said, "Oh, come on, the Pegasus thing has been disproved by the Murari Commission." So they're journalists. They were willing to buy this shit. And I think if you think of this in wider terms, what we have to understand is it's not that the press has become the handmaid of the police. It's that the police has become the investigative arm of the press. Because what the police is producing is not evidence. What they are producing is political dirt for political use by the left. And if you look at the Trump investigations, you see exactly the same thing.
Right.
They were the manufacturing unit for what later became, or immediately became, the grist for the mill of the Washington Post and the New York Times against Trump. So these they kept showing off and saying that they are working in the tradition of Watergate because they're working with leaks. But this was not. But
you don't understand.
I know the new developments about the Watergate.
The most ironic thing about the Watergate thing is that it was also an FBI.
It was also an inside job. But this is worse. This is not a whistleblower working against the FBI. This is the official FBI viewpoint, trumpeted.
No, but this was
But he had an infight inside the FBI.
He didn't get to be the director, so he decided to oust the president, and he used Bob Woodward to do it. But I mean, the point is well taken that, there's this myth based on a total lie, right? That's what the funny thing is that the founding myth
is also a lie.
The foundings, yes, of the watchdog of democracy being the media was a total lie. That's what's so crazy. And so based on this Watergate glory, right, glorification of the media after Watergate and all the president's men, because they got to write their own story, we're all walking around thinking, oh, we can trust journalists. Journalists are going to tell the story. They're going to give us the hard news. But it was always where you stand is where you sit. What you write is based on what you believe in. And the idea of the objectivity of the media was always a crock because you had the more liberal line of most of the media in the United States, the New York Times, Washington Post being the most outstanding examples, and then you had the more conservative line being pressed by the Wall Street Journal. What you didn't have, and you do have today, like you said, it's like what Don Chief Dunn told you, right? They would gloss the news with their views, but there was news that they glossed, and now it's all just gloss. I mean, like. That's the thing, and this is where I want to get back to.
This is postmodernism. You don't need an original to create your imitations. It's like Yair Lapid, right? Yair Lapid is an imitation of nothing.
Right.
And this is why he didn't work as a prime minister.
This is what Seinfeld would be if he were a politician. Or maybe George Kazansky. George.
Lapid you can imitate everything except decision-making. When you're the prime minister, you need to decide.
Well, he decided to give our territorial water to
what did he do? He just became a puppet of the Biden administration. That's what he did. Because why? Because I don't know if you saw his Facebook page. What's on his Facebook page?
Still?
Him joking with Biden.
It's still...
And it's in this subservient pose like this.
The court jester.
Because Lapid thinks of the prime ministership as being a celebrity. And what more... for a celebrity than to have a picture with the president of the United States.
So here's where I wanted to just go back to the substantive conversation that we were having.
I was just going to say that if you pour dish soap into Yair Lapid's mouth, you could actually see the cliches coming like bubbles and bursting when they touch reality.
Okay, let's just go back for a second. So the thing is that the whole thing is a lie, right? They're not for democracy. They're not patriots. They love the PLO, they hate Israel, they hate the army, they hate this, that. But they're now presenting themselves to CBS News and 60 Minutes as these patriots who are talking dirt about the state of Israel, just lying, and then they're going to, like, I think we were doing the ranking order of the most anti-Semitic, entities in the world. So you said Iran's number one, UN is number two. I always thought UN was number one, but okay, I'll take that correction. So the second most anti-Semitic institution, and they're projecting an image that they shouldn't believe the prime minister of the state of Israel and that Bibi is a criminal prime minister. And in Alcatraz, of course, they had that horrible image of Bibi behind bars with a orange prison jumpsuit. Welcome, Bibi. I mean, they're so far beyond any line that they can't even see it in the distance, and they're just racing forward. But the thing is that it's hard for me to understand the left, because this is such utter nonsense. It's such a lie. I'm trying to figure out, why does the left seem to have gotten stronger as a result of this, more energized, more enthusiastic? I mean, this isn't the first time that we've seen this kind of herd mentality on the left. And you came from the left. It was like, Oslo was insane. I mean, like the idea that Arafat was credible, you could believe a word he said when lying went straight with terrorism as his modus operandi. It doesn't make any sense. And then the Gaza withdrawal, oh yeah, let's just give the whole place to terrorists and then they're going to become Singapore. I mean, where is the logical connection between the A and the B that gets you to C? So here we have the same thing. They're saying, let's overturn through violence and demonization and dehumanization the results of the election, paralyze the government until they fall apart, and then we can take over. How is this an act of persuasion? How do people buy it? That's the thing that is it. Are they really just a herd?
I think the answer is complicated, but at the center is the press, because in my understanding of the corruption of the Israeli press, the founding moment was Oslo. And here you have to see that the hopes of these people were for, as Irit Lino, my friend the pundit, put it, their hopes was to have Israel as Sweden in Hebrew. We don't want to be Masada. We don't want to live on our sword. We want to become a normal, i.e., European country that lives peacefully with its neighbors. And in order to do that, you had to imagine your neighbors differently. And the desire was deep, and it became deeper when life became more comfortable here. People got accustomed to a high standard of living, and we just said enough with these wars. And so I think after Yom Kippur, a consoling narrative emerged by which the lack of peace was our fault. So imagine the strength of this consolation, because if it's not our fault, there's nothing to do. But if it is our fault, then we can fix it. So here came the people who said they'll fix it. And it began to fall apart immediately. But I was on the left there, and I can tell you that the media fed us lies and framed the whole thing fraudulently. And we know how, because you talked to Yigal Karmon on this podcast, and Yigal probably told you the story about Nachum Barnea.
Yeah.
Nachum Barnea.
Guys, just watch last week's show and you'll see it. And then
first of all, Yigal is great. Memory is a great institution. But I wrote this, it's in my book, then I wrote it again in Haaretz, and Nachum Barnea sort of threatened to sue him. He sent me some text message.
You wrote an article.
Said, don't do it again. I'll consider my steps henceforth and all that. But he keeps, but then he admits the basic fact. And the basic fact is he got Arafat's speeches calling for jihad against Israel, and he refused to publish them.
Right.
So we were blinded by a press that told us a fairy tale. So this is how the beginning of the...
Yeah, but what's so interesting about that is that when Ehud Barak came back from Camp David, and, he had offered Arafat everything.
It was a turning point for me.
And, okay, let's talk about that for a second. But wait, so he comes back, he says, I pulled the mask off his face, and I'm paraphrasing, but essentially he said it was all a lie. I exposed the lie at the heart of Oslo. This guy does not want peace. We're done. And then he began to backtrack immediately, because rather than rally around the leader and rally around the country after we went and did everything we were supposed to do in order to get peace, he gave up the Temple Mount and we got this massive terror war, the media attacked him. They attacked him mercilessly. And, he was at fault. It was his mistake. He was terrible. He was overly aggressive. He was this. And so he immediately backtracked and became like Shulamit Aloni's doppelganger, right? And so, had I think
he was actually terrible at Camp David, but that doesn't change Arafat.
So, but the left
he drove the Americans crazy.
But the left, even after its leader said it was a lie, and Shlomo Ben Ami said it too in Haaretz, now he pretends that it didn't happen. And when people said, but look, you said to Ari Shavit that there's nobody to talk to, that the Palestinian narrative is a pathological one, he started screaming and threw a temper tantrum on stage. That was with Malka Pudorkovsky 2 years ago at a Haaretz conference. So they don't want to, after the fact, acknowledge what they admitted in real time, and the left attacked them for pointing out reality. The media did, the activists did. So it's even more than the media. I mean, there's something basic. It's like, because what is the option, right? At the end of the day, if your Messiah turned out to have been false, if your belief, your consolation after Yom Kippur, that it was our fault and we could change, and if we changed, then they'll like us. If that works out to have been a lie, then you actually have to build yourself up based on who you actually are, and embrace and stop blaming yourself and celebrate who you are and what you've done. And that's a step that they're not willing to take.
I can tell you what happened to me.
Okay.
And what happened to me is I said, that's a great disappointment. So let's move to unilateralism, because I'm a Zionist. And my greatest fear back then was demography. And I thought we're going to be stuck with a huge Palestinian population, and we're not going to be able to absorb this, and we'd have to choose between democracy and the Jewish character of the state. So I went with Mitzna, who was beaten by Sharon after Mitzna's platform was unilateral withdrawal from Gaza. And then Sharon won the election, and he unilaterally withdrew from Gaza. And then I thought, okay, that will put an end to it, because now we'll impose a state on them. I understood they don't want it. I understood they think that our state is also that our land is also their land. So no partition plan will ever satisfy them. So let's just wall them off and separate from them, because I don't want to be with them. I want a Western kind of democracy. And then Gaza. Rockets from Gaza continued, so we saw Hamas taking over there, and the danger and the idea that this can happen in Judea and Samaria too, which is far larger territory overlooking the seaboard and my home in Tel Aviv, but every important asset of Israel's economy and security. Then I thought, well, we can't have that. And then came the Arab Spring, which was the Islamic winter. And the shock of the Arab Spring for me was that I thought that in the end, in this lava of the Arab world around us, the principle of nationalism will in the end take root and will enable us to operate in a world of nations where some kind of order is conceivable. And then you saw nationhood collapsing as a principle of order. And you look at the Arab world now, and I think it's a civilizational disaster that humanity has never seen. I'm a historian. I don't know of another example of such a collapse, total collapse of a civilization. No principle of political order except the tribe survived in the Arab world. There was no the pan-Arabism, Arab socialism, Arab nationalism. Nothing could last. And then you saw Al-Qaeda and you saw ISIS. And I thought, wait. The first commandment, if we want to live here, is to put some barrier in this region of lava between Tehran and Tel Aviv, and then we can't get off Judea and Samaria. And this is before we talked about how important this land is to Jewish identity, and this is the biblical land of Israel, and all the rest of it. The first thing is survival. and we can't back off the Jordan line.
What's so weird to me is in your whole story, there's no. It's like people on the right didn't seem to play into your calculations at all. I mean, that's one of the irritating, infuriating, but never changing conditions on the left, which they're simply, it seems to me, unwilling to listen to any of the arguments made on the right, so that myself and many others were arguing against the
I was never willing to listen to, because we thought, oh, this crazy woman, Caroline. But I wrote a book about the settlers. So when I was on the left, at around the time of the withdrawal from Gaza, I wrote a book about the settlers, and I went to listen to them. And one of my conclusions was that even within the settler movement, as what we see now, the opposite happening on the left, even in the settlers movement, where the greater land of Israel ideology is so strong and the value of settling the land is so central, even they will accept as the basis for everything national unity. And I thought, and people were saying that the army will break apart, there will be mass refusals. We will have a civil war. And I said, forget it. We will have nothing of the sort. They will not refuse anything, because they have become mamlachtiyim in a deep sense, which is to say,
attached to the state.
It doesn't mean
loyal
attached to the state.
Loyal to the institution.
No, it means Republican with a small r. That's what it means. It means they've accepted the Republican ethos of a national democracy. And the rules of the game in a national democracy is that national unity is what holds together democracies, because the minority always has to accept frustration. In whatever decision you make, you have a minority that's not satisfied. Why does it accept the position of the majority? Because unity is above every single decision. And this is what the left is now breaking up.
But it's not just now. I mean, you've seen this really since Netanyahu's first tenure as prime minister in the 90s, and you saw it with Begin, that they do not accept the legitimacy of elections or leaders who are not their own. So there's something inherently imperious about the character of the left. They don't really listen to people on the right. They discount them as madmen or whatever, or bad people before they listen to them, and then they reject a victory in an election if it belongs to the other side, and the legitimacy of a leader if he's not their guy. So it's I guess
my friend he's a physician. He says the left has no values, only goals.
So what are their goals?
So
their goal is power.
The goal, and these people who are behind Barak,
Ehud Barak.
Ehud Barak, the ones among them who are more patriotic, and I'll say in a minute why I think that the basic trend of this protest movement is not against the reform. It's not against Netanyahu. It's not even against the right. It's against the Jewish character of the state. This is what they're out against. It's not even just partition, because after partition will come the state to all its citizens. What they want, I read a piece from Amos Shokin, who said real peace would be assimilation in the region, when we have intermarriage between Jews and Arabs all over, and we will just fade into the Arab world. I'm guessing that for Amos Shokin himself, he will not live like people live under Arab regimes because he has enough money to protect himself. But this is it. This is the vision of Haaretz. This is what Haaretz as an institution is working towards.
The patriots around Barak.
So the real patriots think this is their line of thinking. They think the greatest danger to Israel
are the Jews.
Is binationalism, and since we can't convince the Israeli public, let's try forcing the Israeli public to recognize this and force them back into the Oslo track. So one way to do it is intercept the right. So we had the Bibi trials. And another way to do it is international pressure. So let's persuade the Biden administration to withhold aid to Israel. Let's go to the UN and convince them that Israel is an apartheid. Because when pressure will come, and the example is South Africa, when international pressure would be strong enough, then Israel would finish the occupation.
So that's again the thing, right? So I see an existential danger in Oslo, but I don't go to the UN and say Tamir Pardo is a traitor. Nobody goes out to the nations of the world and says, all of these people should be hung or placed behind bars.
But a right-wing pundit, the guy who actually, in my building, there's a synagogue, and this is where his synagogue. And he was in Galatz, and he chazar b'tshuva.
He was on Army radio, and he became religious.
Yeah, and so he said, when Chagai Elad, the head of B'Tselem, a so-called human rights institution, went to the Security Council to portray Israel, to blood libel, basically, to spread blood libels against Israel. And he wrote on his, I think it was a Twitter or a Facebook feed, he said, you remember that Netanyahu said about Rabin that he's not a traitor, he's just mistaken? Well, Chagai Elad is not mistaken. So some of these people, I think, at least, I don't know if this goes by the legal definition of traitors, but they are undermining the existence of the state of Israel by these reckless attempts to undermine.
Okay, so I want to underline that point that you made about the Jewish nature of Israel, because I think it's a key insight. And I also wrote about it. You guys should read my article from Friday, A Prayer for 5784, where I go through this whole thing. But I think that, we started hearing, and it was really our own Barak who made this case explicit, where he asserted a contradiction between Israel's Jewish character and its democratic character. He always says Jewish and democratic as if there's a contradiction in terms between them. But when you look at the full swath of Jewish history, you see that there's really no more anti-tyrannical people on the face of the planet. I mean, we are like, by our nature, a rebellious bunch of loudmouths, and we don't stop questioning authority. I mean, the whole Gemara is one big questioning authority, and everything we are. The character of a people matters at the end of the day, and there's nothing in the Jewish DNA that would lead you to the conclusion that we could possibly embrace tyranny, except maybe if you graft on the socialist, communist aspects of.
But it's not just a trait of the Jewish people. The idea of national self-determination is nationhood and democracy are two faces of the same coin. Because what happens when you take a group of people and you give them the liberty to shape their own future? They create a public sphere after their own culture. This is what it means. And therefore, I always say to the post-Zionists, the only way to make Israel a non-Jewish state is to disenfranchise the populations. Because if you have a majority of Jews and you have and they have the vote, it will be a Jewish state. Saturday will be our day of rest. Hebrew will be our first official language. The holidays of Israel will be our official calendars. Your child will come back from school for a Hanukkah vacation with this little piece of cardboard candle on their forehead, because this is what democracy allows you to do. It allows, when it's a democracy, is a beautiful thing. It allows a people to be itself. And therefore, when I teach the history of the Zionist idea to students for many years. And after I explain the logic of everything, I tell them, look, there's this old lady who's a Holocaust survivor who explained everything that I just told you in a 1.5 hour lecture in 2 sentences. When she was asked, it was these testimonials when they have a bunch of survivors and they ask them the same question. And I don't know who thought of this silly question, to ask them, what was the happiest day for you at the end of the war? What do you mean? Auschwitz was liberated. What do you think? So that's what they mainly answered. And she said that the happiest day was when I came to a ship of Aliyah, Bet, the illegal immigration to Israel, and I saw the door to the ship, and there was a sign in Hebrew above the door saying entrance. And the interviewer looked at her and said, what do you mean? You were just released from Auschwitz, and this is the happiest moment. Why? Is this a symbolic thing? And she said, no, you don't understand. I never saw Hebrew letters that big. Imagine that. I sat in the audience and saw this on a video screen, and my heart stopped, because this is my father. My father was not a Holocaust survivor. He was a refugee. But she said Hebrew letters were small. It's something you hide. So for the first time, my language is the language of the public sphere. And now every time I go in Ayalon and I see these huge Hebrew signs, I remember this one. I mean, not every time, but I keep remembering her, because this is the essence of it. And we in Israel breathe it like air. We don't notice it.
To the point where people are not acknowledging it or valuing it, and they want to throw it away.
Yeah.
You know, and that really, I guess, it is. I don't know if I want to end this conversation at all, but if we're going to end it, I mean, I wonder, how is this going to end? You know, I look, and they're becoming so extreme, so openly hostile, so harmful to the country. I mean, what they're doing in the United States this week while Netanyahu is there is unspeakable. It was unimaginable just yesterday that anything like this could happen, and yet here they are, these Israeli emigres in the United States, and I guess they're probably buffeted by progressive American Jews who live to hate Israel. You know, like that's their sine qua non of their Jewish identities. We hate Israel. So they're all getting together in New York to vilify the democratically elected government of Israel, our prime minister, and the nation that voted them into office. And I don't know, like, I keep waiting for the other shoe to fall. You know, I keep waiting for something to give, that people are going to say, okay, we've had enough. This is crazy. At the beginning, it was, you know, when they were showing the PLO flag at all of their protests on Kaplan Street, then all the PR executives quickly, you know, grabbed the PLO flags and printed 1 million Israeli flags.
Drown them out. Yeah.
Right.
But who is printing those flags? You know,
the Chinese.
No, but who's financing it? Kobi Richter and this.
Right.
Kobi Richter is an Israeli billionaire who said that the only hope for the left is an alliance with the Arab parties, and he voted for the Arab joint list. Meshutefet is a joint list. Yeah. So he voted for them, and this tells you that in order to sell their ideological merchandise, they have to cover it with a flag. Well, and I saw Haaretz, this Orkashti, some Haaretz correspondent for education. He was rejoicing when they put the Israeli flag on a Haredi politician's house. And I tweeted this on Twitter. If you put the Israeli flag on the Haaretz building, half of the Haaretz people will get allergic reaction. There's one thing they can't stand. And this is the good part of what's been happening, is that now, you know, Fuad Ajami once said, and this, I made it into the motto of my book. Fuad Ajami, the great Lebanese historian, he's a really deep-thinking man, and he said, you can choose the symbols by which you'll fight your enemies, but once you choose them, they have a logic of their own. And so now, Amos Shokin is stuck with the flag. They're stuck with the flag. So if you ask yourself what will be their undoing, is that the contradiction between the flag and the BDS will become too strained to hold together.
Cognitive dissonance is going to collapse and the whole thing, you think?
I think that many people who now saw these Achim Laneshek, these supposed patriotic anti-reform gang on 60 Minutes, saying the lies that the human rights organizations have been saying, some of them are going to pause. And as you said, and I think the other encouraging development is that the mainstream media is sinking. And I wonder how much time it will take, because the New York Times is not a newspaper anymore. As Andrew Clavin says, it's the former newspaper. And now, you know, if you are a sensible person reading it, even if you want to deny it, you sort of know it already. Because there was a big noise about the Hunter Biden laptop. It was hushed up. The New York Times admitted it a year and a half later, but it admitted it. So you read this and you say, but what do you mean? You mean you have been lying for a year and a half now? Well, they don't say it, but that's what they've been doing, and they're still living on the glory of the past, but it will not last forever.
You're saying
Your podcast is going to replace them.
Well, that's true, but but more important than that, I mean, it reminds me of all of this defector literature from the Soviet Union. All right, like I read this book called Tower of Lies that was written by a KGB officer, the top, he was the cyber guy of the KGB in the 1970s, and he defected to the United States.
Cyber was what?
It was
SIGINT. Signal intelligence.
But yeah, it was eavesdropping, and it's a brilliant book. I recommend it to anybody. Actually, Jim Woolsey gave it to me, the former director of CIA, which is kind of a cool story in and of itself. But anyway, so the defector literature, it's like everybody sort of has this moment where they start recognizing that something is awry. So his was that every couple of years, the encyclopedia was all in loose leaf binders, and they would
change it. They would take out Trotsky and put orchids.
Right, they would put in the new entries and take out the old ones, and
you have to send them back because you couldn't keep them.
Right, so that was when his parents were updating the encyclopedia every so often. That he started, but what took the Soviet Union to fall was economic. It was strategic. It was a strategic defense initiative. It was the invasion of Afghanistan. It was stuff from outside that ended up collapsing the inside. So now we're talking about a domestic political camp that's lording over through tyrannical means the majority of the country that's not with them. And then the question is, okay, so they're not going to invade Afghanistan. I mean, they are overindulging in complete dependence on the United States, which is collapsing. But, I'm trying to figure out, is it going to be the low ratings? Is it going to,
No, it can be a war.
Yeah.
The next because this whole, as I said, this whole thing is resting on a dream
from 73. So a new 73 is gonna
or something. But this is a dream of Israel as a Sweden before 2015. So this dream is unsupportable in the Middle East. So in one or another point, it will bump into reality. The question is, will we wake up in time, or will this be so late that if a politician, I can't quote him by name, but because I didn't get his permission to quote him on that, said, this generation is not willing to fight. It's the same problem here and in America and in Europe. They're not willing to fight for anything. Fighting is going to be done by someone else. So if I'll write a dystopic satirical novel about the rise of the Supreme Court as our new government, we will not have the IDF. We will have the Eritreans who escaped conscriptions in Eritrea be the new IDF or the Barak.
I don't know who this politician is, but his low assessment of the Israeli youth leaves me thinking that he's just doesn't know what he's talking about. But
I hope so.
I think that unlike the Europeans and the Americans and whatnot, our youth is more than willing to fight for this country. The question is whether they have commanders who are worthy of them, and that's the problem.
But there's also we also have to see the Israeli situation in context. So one remark on that before we go. So my book Nayadim v'Nayachim tried to say that everywhere the conflict is between a new international class which does not see itself as national. And these people see themselves as belonging to the same circle. When I wrote about the young Israeli culture in the 90s, I called it these people. This, if I may quote myself, I called these people. This was the favorite phrase of Judge Oliver.
Like, you're a volunteer; you can do whatever you want.
The favorite phrase of Judge Oliver Wendell Holmes, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, was, "If I may quote myself again." So I called it the international floating republic of Seinfeld viewers. So now it's of Netflix subscribers, but they see themselves. This is a very parochial thing. Is when you belong to a province, you want to think of yourself as belonging to the metropolis. So you leave behind your Jewish identity. This swampy, smelly, warm Jewish culture, and you want to breathe the warm.
Well, that's actually
air of
sort of the trend
internationalism.
that's being borne out in your neck of the woods in Tel Aviv, Herzliya corridor. But, you know, back in the provinces of Tel Aviv, people think very differently about things, and certainly in this beautiful city of Jerusalem.
People live there.
Yeah, me.
Yeah.
And my family.
You know
But,
what the
you know,
difference between this episode and our beginning, Caroline?
No.
Is that in the beginning, since I was the veteran, I interviewed you.
Right.
And now you interviewed me.
Well, thanks
and
to
it
you.
just occurred to me. Yeah.
No, thanks.
So
to
I
you.
got to talk too.
Well, you understand that, like, it used to be, I would get these comments. Let Gadi talk, Caroline. Gee, like, could you just shut up? And I hope that, I love you, but shut up.
I was mesmerized because we laughed a lot. And what I knew about you from the media, I didn't know you have a sense of humor. I was just, yeah, I know.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm Mrs.
And
Setway.
who was the person who told you keep smiling?
Yeah, it never works. My dad told me to, and he died trying. Let me tell you, be careful. Anyway, listen, I appreciate it, and hopefully, you go from strength to strength and come back, and I'll see you on your pre-recorded episodes of the Friday Night Thing. Because my husband certainly won't let me do it on Shabbat, and neither would I. But I thank you for all the great work you do, and don't be a stranger on the Caroline Glick Show.
I love to.
You are a guest, but you've been demoted.
But the coffee is good, and the mug is awfully impressive.
Isn't it awesome? I'm telling you what, these people in the studio, they just know how to.
I got a mug from a conservative conference. I won't say the name in Europe, and then I turned it over, and it said "Made in China."
Amazing. Well, what are you going to do? You can't solve all the world's problems at once, right? I don't know. Anyway, all right. Well, guys, we'll see you again next week. We'll see you again next week. I think we're taking a break for Sukkot because I'm going away. But we'll see you next week, and thanks so much.
Thanks, Caroline. It was a pleasure.
All right. Take care.